Balchagi Force. Hi, I'm Alessandro Baldasseroni and I'm currently employed at Riot Games as a senior character artist. I will give you a brief introduction about myself and my work soon. And excited to be seen by you guys.
Hi, I'm Alessandro Baldasseroni, and I'm currently senior character artist at Riot Games. And I have a past of about 10 years of lead character artist at Blur Studio before that. And all in all, it's been almost like 10 years that I've been here in California doing the job of character modeler. And thank you to Jinho for the opportunity to talk to you guys.
안녕하세요. 전 마리아라고 하고요.
Okay.
네, 저는 현재 프로덕션 매니저 블러에서 일하고 있습니다.
박수 한번 칠까요?
네. Where's Jinho? I mean, where's Kai? Kai wants to do that. Okay. All right. So shall we start? 이제 시작할까요?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, oh my God. Shall we talk about? Let's talk a little bit more about yourself.
Okay. I didn't really do any specific schools to do this job, and I have to say I've been very lucky. I actually started. I did like different studies in my life. I studied like math at the university, but at some point I gave up the university, and I started working in a company that was doing basically telecommunication. And I was using AutoCAD at that time. AutoCAD is a software that basically we were using that to put like outlets on a blueprint, you know,
Oh, okay.
because we were like basically building electric implants at that time. So I was using this software from Autodesk, which was called AutoCAD, and it still exists. And one day, one of my coworkers, he knew that I was trying to do some 3D with AutoCAD, but it wasn't exactly like the sort of like software that was like very specific to do what I wanted, which was something more like illustrative. So he gave me a copy of 3D Studio Max 1.0, and I started playing with that, especially at home. I was like, you know, we're talking about 1998, you know, so even like 3D was very pioneeristic at that time.
Yeah.
So I installed it at home, and I was using it every day. It was like intoxicating, and I started building like you know, very simple images based on what I could do at that time. I mean, we're talking about a time where the modeling technique were not very developed, you know. So I was using NURBS, I was using splines, you know, to do very simple things like spheres, or maybe like a Christmas tree, or maybe like a car. Simple things like that. Nothing that was connected to characters, you know. So I was doing a lot of 3D by myself, and I was trying to find information about how to do some stuff, like technical information. But at that time, I mean, we're talking about almost like the beginning of the internet. There was not much online, you know. So it was very, very pioneeristic. But that said, I built a very small portfolio of like images, which were made in 3D, 3D Studio Max, and I put them online. At the time, there were not like many resources, many like CG portals, but I remember one in particular. It was a 3D Cafe, and when I got published, the sort of the equivalent of a front page in some like modern website, it was such a big honor for me, because I was like, wow, somebody kind of likes what I can do in 3D. But my daily job was something like completely different. It wasn't really creative. So what happened at some point, I was like, maybe I can make a living out of this. And so I would start looking for companies in my city, in Milan, where I could actually maybe find a job that, you know, was somehow connected to maybe video games or something like that. So I started looking, and I found this company which was called Milestone, and they're still there. So I submitted my portfolio, which I'm talking about like just 5 simple images in 3D. And surprisingly, they said, okay, we are interested, you know, we want to make a, you know, let's have an interview. And that's where everything change it because I was like, oh my God, I can make this for a living. And I was totally, self-taught, I didn't do any specific school for that, but there was somebody interested in making me work on video games for that simple portfolio that I had. And the rest is like, I went, I did an interview, and from there, I completely changed my career from just like a clerk in a company that was basically doing electric devices to something more like creative. And I was working for a game company, and I worked in Milan, in Milestone, for about 5 years.
Can I see the work at that time?
Yeah.
You put the...
They're still available. I still have my old website online if you want to see it.
따라 이겁니다.
Is it your website?
The old one.
The old one.
This one is like more
옛날
than
거.
15 years old.
근데 이게 공개되어 있지 않은 그런 웹사이트였구나.
15년 전에 만들었던 웹사이트래요.
그때 이제 이걸...
Yeah. These are my very first things.
You still have it?
Yeah. We're talking about 1998.
1998.
Yeah.
1998년에 이제 만들었던.
So this is my portfolio that I basically submitted, more than.
So you got hired, Blur,
Not
with
through
this?
it, no.
Not for this.
I got hired in Milan with this kind of
Yeah.
stuff.
Okay.
That's amazing. Wow.
I mean, this is like,
This was 1998 though.
yeah, it's like relics of PG.
근데 이거는 되게 많이
This one
궁금해.
is a little bit more recent. I think there is a date. Yeah, 2005.
Okay.
I mean, it's
So,
still like 12
책에서
years
본 적이
ago.
있어요. I've seen this picture on the book.
Yeah, it's been published.
So,
I
okay.
mean, the very old one are all
Yeah.
the way up. Yeah,
Yeah.
this kind of stuff.
1990.
Yeah.
1996년도.
And I didn't really have like any specific technique, I was just trying to do things that I like to do, and I was like fierce when it comes to getting things done,
Wow.
I mean, I know that like you see this stuff today, and nobody's really impressed, but at the time for me it meant a lot because I was like, wow, I'm able to do these things with a program that I don't really know. One thing that I want to remark is the fact that now I'm a character artist, so I'm specialized in doing characters, but that's not the way I started. I started because I had a genuine love for computer graphic at 360 degrees, and this work actually witnessed it. At the beginning, I wasn't really trying to do characters. That came later. That came because people like the character that I did, and they show an interest. So from that moment on, when I started working in a company like Blur, they were like, okay, you're gonna do only characters from now on. But at the beginning, I was just like, I like modeling, I like computer graphics, so let's make something out of it. It can be a building, it can be an object, it can be, an environment, and I have some examples there in my portfolio. So the characters came later, but I didn't start with the idea of like making characters for living, as a matter of fact, when I was working in the video game company in Milan, it was a company that was basically making racing games, So we were either doing cars or trucks. There was not much else to do at that time. And I was doing both. I was doing basically both cars and trucks. That's why I have so many examples of like vehicles in those like early years of my career, because it was fun. Honestly, I never really specifically choose to do characters. It's something that people recognize that I was good at, and from that moment on, we know that the industry here is very specialized. So they tend to be like, okay, you're good at this, you're gonna do this, So what happened is that I was working at this company. I was, we were making video games, but I always had this like back thought about making personal artworks. For me, even now, is a constant drive in my life to make like personal works and to not being stuck with the reality of your workplace, So at this time, I was doing a lot of like extra things on my own when I was like finished work, and I was keep publishing my stuff online. Not only that, I was not only putting them in my own website, but I was trying to reach also like communities and portals. At the time, for example, CG Talk, which is now called CG Society, was very, very popular.
What is that?
It's a web portal. It's a a community, an online community of people interested in
Like
CG.
a forum.
Yeah, like a forum.
Okay.
Yeah, like a forum. And there was like a huge factor of exposure, because like I finally connected with a lot of people that had my same interest, and they were responding very well to the things that I was like publishing. So I can fairly say that I got like a fair amount of like popularity online through that, and that opened, to be honest, like a lot of doors. And I wasn't really completely aware of like the importance of like online presence even at that time, because what happens is that a few companies, but very good one, actually international ones, they got interested in my work. They were like, oh, you post this thing online. Do you take freelance work? Well, would you available to, I was starting getting like gig offers and job offers. And for me, it was intoxicating. It was beautiful because I really loved what I was doing. And plus, I was not really like confined to the reality of my town in Italy. I was like, wow, there's a whole world that, is interested in these kind of things. And maybe I can thinking about exploring different projects, different companies, maybe if you want.
So at that time, were you still doing all different kind of models, or were you slowly focusing?
At the time, I was starting to focus on characters, just because I'm a huge nerd fan when it comes like to comics and movies. And, comics and movies are mostly like character centric for obvious reasons, so that's what was the time when I was trying to do like, oh, I love Batman, let's make a Batman, or I love manga, let's make like a character from my manga. And my technique was limited at the time, but I was really doing my best, And frankly, if I was looking around a bit about like the same artists in my field, I was feeling that, okay, you're pretty good, there's not many people that can do this, It's not like today there is a lot of like inflation when it comes to that, and the bar is like very high. Back in the days, it was really easy to impress people with little, but yeah, not really visual striking as what you can find today, So what happened is that at some point, I remember I did an interview here in the US at some point with a company that was interested in hiring me, and that was Flagship Studios. They were doing this game called Hellgate London at the time. So I came and visit here in the US, and I did an interview, and they really liked what I was doing. Maybe it wasn't the right time for me to actually move to the US. I don't know, I sort of like freaked out about the idea of like leaving my country. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't, I was very fascinated by what they were doing, but it wasn't the right time for me. But then when I came back to Italy, I was like, maybe, I don't know, maybe I've lost the train, maybe like, but then what happened is that Blur contacted me. Blur contacted me in the form of...
Blur find you?
Blur find me, again, because I was very present online, because they saw my stuff online. That's the only reason why. I mean, I would never grow tired of like recommending to anybody at any level to publish your stuff online, and be sure that your work is like exposed to critiques, to feedbacks. And the more your work is good, the more you have the chance that somebody like around the world actually notice you, and either offers you like a freelance gig, or maybe like offers you to relocate, and then it's up to you to decide. That is exactly what happened to me. So,
그때가 2007, right?
Yeah.
2007.
Okay, what happened is that Blur basically was very frank with me. They were like, we really like your work, so we want you to try to freelance for us and see how it goes. I mean, there were no planning to relocate since the beginning. They were like, let's do some freelancing. And I've been done a lot of freelancing for Blur. Actually, yeah. I was freelancing from Italy for Blur. And the way it was working, it was that I had a regular daytime job, so 8 hours a day at the game company. And then when I was going home, I was working for Blur. And it was very intense because like the schedule at the time for characters were pretty pretty intense. We're talking about like maybe like 20 days for a full character with modeling and texturing. But even the expectation was like not as much as today, you know. So I was working night hours basically to satisfy Blur, but to me it was like intoxicating. I mean, my side job was better than my daily job in terms of like, you know, satisfaction and fascination. I was like, oh my god, I'm working on Blur cinematics, and even at the time, everybody was knowing Blur for what they were.
So you wanted to work for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, but I was content with that. I was content with the freelancing, to be honest. I wasn't. I mean, maybe like the idea of relocating was kind of like in the back of my head. It was kind of like a remote or abstract, but I wasn't really pushing to actually get hired. And then it happened naturally, because what happened is that I suspect that some people left in character modeling at some point. And so they asked me, hey, would you be interested in moving over? Because you have been freelancing for us for a while, and we like what we like our relationship, we like what you do, the quality of the work that you provide. It would be interesting to have you here in the studio in Venice. And I didn't think too much. I was like, okay, I mean, I think it's time to go. I mean, I can't lose this train, because like, I mean, I was like 34 at that time. So I was like,
It's like 10 years after you started.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you studying English back in Italy?
Well, if you go to school in Italy, especially my generation, they teach you English at school. But the thing is like,
근데 우리도 학교에 영어를 배우잖아, 한국 사람.
they don't really prepare you to have a conversation in English. So it's a lot of like grammar, it's a lot of like written tests.
한국이랑 비슷하다. 네. So
And
how did you learn how to speak English then?
Well, I had to learn English for survival, you know. But when I came here, I could communicate. I mean, my English was kind of like rudimental at the time, but it was enough to communicate, at least at work. Because honestly, we were not talking too much, especially in a place like Blur. I mean, sometimes there are like briefings, but you know, there's a lot of like notes that come like through text, you know. And honestly, like the work lingo is not that sophisticated. That you know.
그래서 처음에 미국에 왔을 때는 그냥 영화 그냥 간단한 것만.
아니 잘했어, 여기 처음 왔을 때도.
그래요?
너 처음 잘했어.
You said that you're really good in English when you first arrived.
No, I wasn't. You think I was? I don't know how much it was, how good you were, but.
Were you here 10 years ago?
I struggle a lot.
똑같이 시작했어요, 우리 같은 날. You're 2007 August, right?
Yeah.
2007.
No, 2007 October.
October.
I think you came like a couple of months.
근데 이탈리아는 영어는 좀 다른 점이 있잖아요. 한국어는 이제 완전 다르지만 이제 이탈리아 영어는 조금 있고. Did you hang out with a lot of Italians when you're here?
No, not at all.
그니까.
No, zero.
그러니까 여기 와서 이제 이탈리안 친구들보다는 이제 영어를 쓰는 친구들이랑 많이 놀았고. 네, 진호 씨는 한국 커뮤니티랑 같이 있었죠? 아마도 그게 편하니까. Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, to be fair, English at work was the last of my concerns. You know, I mean.
That's true. You don't need much. You don't need to have like a perfect English.
왜냐면 한국 분들은 그게 되게 궁금하거든. 왜냐면 코리안의 English and 그게 어떻게 이렇게 되는? 왜냐면 같은 이탈리아도 영어를 쓰는 게 아닌데 그거를.
되게 간단해요. 그냥 미국에 오면 한국 친구들이랑 놀지 말고 외국 친구들이랑 놀면 어쩔 수 없이 영어가 늘어져요.
But anyway, I just want to like remark that the process from moving to Italy to the US wasn't really like a matter of like weeks. It took like months, because usually when a company is interested in you, they invest in like a visa. You know, you need like a working permit. So for Blur, it took a while, and they explored some options for my case. And since I didn't have like the equivalent of the right amount of like studies for the American education system, they were like, okay, we can't do this like specific visa for you, but let's try to do one of the most like common visa for artists, which is the O1 visa. And it's a visa that
O1.
Yeah.
How long does that take to get?
For me, it took about 1 year, you know, from when they start applying to the end. But it's a visa that is usually given to people that are like, you know, proficient or somehow like very talented in their field. And I was like, wow, I'm confused, because like I never attended any schools. I never like, you know, got any degrees in computer graphic, you know. And they were like, well, but you have a lot of like presence online. So you got awards, you got like articles and tutorials, you know. And I couldn't believe that, you know, an award assigned by forum like CG Society matter so much. But they do, and they still do.
So how was it when you came to work?
Honestly, like the transition work-wise wasn't too hard because I was already freelancing for them. So I really knew the quality that was expected, but it was intoxicating to be in the studio, to actually meet like a lot of the people that I already knew, but only online. And man, at the time, I mean, even now, Blur is like so full of like talents. They just look for that, you know. And to me, it was like inebriating, like every day, like working like side to side with a lot of people that I really admire, you know, in character modeling, of course, but even in other departments. And honestly, I realized that the work as a production artist in-house was a little bit like more different, like compared to my freelance experience. Because when I was in Italy, yes, of course, at the end I was doing characters. But when you work in the actual studio, you deal with a lot of like things, especially like technical things and like relationship, like person to person, that you don't really see if you were at home. So that for me was very, very interesting. Plus the fact that obviously I was new in a new country. It was very, very intoxicating in a good way, you know.
Did you have a lot of foreigners back then?
Oh, it was everybody. I mean, like,
everybody was a foreigner.
no, not everybody, not every single one, but so many people were like foreigners. I mean, Blur was not caring at all about like nationality or background. They were like, you have a great portfolio, this is the right place for you. And they were like investing in people. They were like, okay, there is a great guy, whatever, in this country, we're gonna try to get it. We're gonna like, you know.
It's still like that.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. So yeah, they were investing in visas, and it was like a lengthy process. But you know, it was great to be there because you knew that everybody around you were, you know, very like specifically selected to do a specific job, and they were really good at it. So for me, it was like feeling like, you know, part of like a very elitary, you know, company where if you are here, it's not because you have like somebody that recommended you or because like you know people, it's just because you're good. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. A lot of hard work, but a lot of fun, especially the first years. You know?
Right. I mean, challenges are always fun when you are able to overcome. If there isn't, then it's not.
Absolutely.
Did you have it? Is that where you started your character modeling?
Yes, Blur hired me specifically to do characters. Even when I was freelancing for them, it was all about characters. So once in a while, I was doing also like, you know, props or like, you know, when there were a few times where maybe in between projects, they were like, you want to help out with like doing some props, some objects, you know, and to me it was fun because I have a background of like modeler at 360 degrees. So I was like, yeah, sure. I mean, it doesn't matter. The technique is pretty much the same. I maybe not have to deal with like riggers. So, you know, it's even easier. So yeah, I mean,
That's true.
But yeah, it was mostly characters and a lot of characters in a very short amount of time. And the good thing is that you are seeing the result of your work like pretty fast. I mean, at the time you're like, depends like from project to project, but maybe the average time in 2007 was like 4 months for a cinematic, you know, maybe, I don't want to say something stupid, but I remember it was very fast. So, you know, from the moment you were starting to work on a character to the moment when you actually were seeing it online as a Blur cinematic on YouTube or whatever channel, it was very fast. And it was, in the meantime, you already maybe working on another character, you know, as it happens now, I'm sure. You know? That was the great thing about working in that company, and I always have like fond memories of those years. It was so much fun.
So on the other hand, while you were like, you had to learn a lot, right? Because you're like one person doing the technical stuff, and you know there's a lot of things to learn. But on the other hand, Riot, you got like so much support. How is it different?
the difference between, okay, let's do a step back. And my job at Blur was basically making characters, but through the years, and I spent there about like 10 years, my position naturally evolved to a more like management in a way, like, you know, as a character lead. Yeah. So we were, in a way, doing less art in my last years of Blur and doing more managing, because as a lead character artist in Blur, you are basically managing a team of people, and sometimes lots of these people were like freelancers. So it was a lot of like, hey, I need to check somebody else's asset and be sure that they are in time and giving notes and stuff like that. So I always felt like an artist at the core, and this thing wasn't really working for me. But I mean, I don't blame the company. That was their necessity at the time. It was maybe like the time for me to actually move on and try to go back to the origins, because I really like doing characters like constantly, and I still doing it in my spare time when I have the chance. So Riot offered me this opportunity, and they were like, basically at the time they already had like a cinematic department, and they offered me a position where I could just basically do what I like, just characters without any sort of like supervision or like management stuff, you know, which that's not really my thing. And that's one of the reasons why I moved to Riot Games, to do basically pretty much like the same job I was doing at Blur, but in a different environment. And as far as the differences, I can say that Riot doesn't have like clients. I mean, we have our players with our core base of players, which we really care about. So we have responsibilities to them, but we don't really have like to deliver a show for any sort of like company that pays us for. So that translates into having like a more relaxed schedules when it comes to do the things that we do, which I really like, to be honest, in this stage of my life, because I'm over 40s now. So even if I really love the fast pace of Blur in my first years, now I'm in a stage of my life when I'm like, well, you know, I really like what I do, but I want to also be physically healthy, have time for myself. I want to like enjoy my free time, and all those things basically went into the equation of like, okay, it was a good ride, but maybe it's time to move and see what other companies have to offer me. So the rhythm of Riot is very like relaxed compared to Blur. Unfortunately, I can't show anything yet because we didn't come out yet with something, but hopefully we will soon. But my job at Riot is basically like making characters the same way I was doing at Blur. We're a different pipeline because we use Maya and Arno at the moment, but you know, the technical specifications are just like numbers, you know.
근데 그건 아시죠? 그때 지금은 또 블러가 바뀌었어요. 그 마리아 왔을 때도 지금 그 데런 휴스턴 하는 역할이 예전에는 그 포지션이 없었어요. 그래서 예전에는 그 리드 캐릭터 아티스트가 그 블러가 그 외주 프리랜서 있는 분들을 다 컨트롤을 다 했어요. 그래서 그때 상당히 일이 많았어요. 이렇게.
There's actually a new position right now that you did. Right now, currently at Blur, we have something called asset manager.
Oh, okay.
Who takes care of all the things that lead characters used to do.
Yeah. Too late.
They learn.
Yeah.
근데 이게 블러도 이제 그게 상당히 아티스트들한테 상당히 안 좋다는 걸 안 거예요. 그래서 그때 그 포지션 그거를 리드 아티스트한테 사실 너무나 큰 자기 일도 해야 되는데 따로 한다는 게 너무 그래서 지금은 많이 그렇게 바꿨어요. 예. 근데 뭐 too late.
And these are some samples from.
These are samples of characters that have been done. It's mostly like Riot intellectual properties, Riot characters of League of Legends. Most of these have been done actually at Blur for the cinematics that we have done.
League of Legends.
League of Legends, you know. And a couple I've done that in my spare time, because obviously now I work at Riot, so all I hear around me is like Riot culture and Riot characters, you know, and I really like them, you know. So yeah, I collected a bunch of like these assets through the years, you know.
누가 그 블러에서 작업한 그 게임 시네리 유튜브에서 링크 좀 올려줄래요?
Yeah, the fact that I work on both Riot Games cinematics when I was a Blur was a huge plus for Riot to be interested in me.
They already have your...
Yeah, because I knew that I was able to understand their sensibility when it comes to, you know, art and style and, you know.
어쩌면 이게 운명이라고 해야 되나? 블러에서 이제 일했을 때...
네, 그쵸. 게임 시네마틱식을 해서.
그쵸.
근데 그, 뭐지? 나도 그랬어요.
아, 그래요?
네, I did the same thing. 나도 그 Titanfall game cinematic, I made the main character. So I got hired.
Yeah.
It's like a good thing and a bad thing. 클라이언트에서 이제 와서 이제 그쪽으로 가고, 진호 씨도 클라이언트 그쪽에 일해서 그쪽으로 가시고. 뭘 안 됐다.
That honestly like tells an important truth in this industry, where that if you want to apply to a company that has a specific brand, maybe sometimes it's worth having your portfolio something that connects with them to a certain level. I don't know, like, you know, if you love Blizzard, maybe if you do some like World of Warcraft or Diablo fan art, that will, you know, as long as it's good, it would impress them and be like, oh my god, this guy is a fan, you know, and plus he does like great work, you know. So, you know, it's not mandatory, but you know,
that's a good tip.
Yeah.
It's always true, I believe, that if a company has some specific IP, showing some love for that IP in your portfolio is always like something that is appreciated.
I mean, definitely that's more helpful than like if they're asking for stylized and you give realism. It's like, well, you're great, but you're not exactly what we're looking for.
Yeah.
That's a good tip.
Yeah, I mean, like having more like time for myself. I try to explore like go back to like freelancing for people that actually ask me to do commission work. Like this one's an example. Most of these works are actually for statues, for collectibles. So this one is like Sideshow Collectible, which is based in California, and then I have some for Prime One Studio, which is instead of like a Japanese company. But the idea behind these sculptures is that they're going to be 3D printed, and it was a field that I really wanted to explore for a while. Finally, these days, I mean, these months, I had the chance to do it. The difference is the difference between these kind of works and kind of like character modeling for a company like Blur is that there's a lot of like technical specification when you work in production in an animation studio like Blur. So you need to take care of like topology, cleanness of the mesh, penetrations, and a lot of things that have to do with other departments as well, which is not character modeling, you know. So it's like always like a teamwork. When it comes to this kind of like works instead for sculptures, it's mostly just you by yourself. So you basically don't care to a lot of things, like especially topology. In a way, we can say it's like more artistic because most of the time you just stay into ZBrush and with the support of like application like Studio Max or Maya. But on the other side, the level of like accuracy that you need to have when it comes to the sculpting is way higher because you can't really hide anything since it's going to be 3D printed as a physical object.
That's true.
So the amount of revision that you can have on this kind of like works can be very, very high. Depends on the client, but since it's going to be 3D printed, they want to be sure that the artistic vision is nailed.
Do you think this is a good sample that you could work on to put it on your portfolio for character modeling?
Maybe it's not that like significant for a place like Blur. Something like this, I believe that definitely shows you that you have a sensibility when it comes to sculpting. But for a production studio like Blur, they want to see even if you can texture, an example. Not all the animation studios are like that. In most of the animation studios, actually the professional figure of somebody that does like modeling and texturing is like separated. So either you model or either you do texture. And sometimes like you can do both, but depends on the studio. Blur is one of those places. So they really want you to also be able to do texturing.
Do everything, basically.
Yeah, it's a lot of like skills combined.
Yeah.
They basically want you to be good at modeling, to be good at like do texturing and shading, of course. And when you put all these things together, sometimes it can be overwhelming when the time is limited.
But it helps you because you get to be more than one person.
Oh yeah,
you're gonna
yeah.
be available. Like people will want
You
you.
build a lot of like
Yeah.
skills that you can sell in different ways and in different
That's true.
companies, and then it makes you feel like very, very versatile. I mean, if you accept like the deal, yeah. So this is the main difference, that it's more like freestyles when it comes to 3D printing. There are some like technical considerations, like all the meshes needs to be watertight, so they can't have like open edges, because obviously it's going to be printed, so it can't have like inconsistent geometry, and they need to be balanced, not that when they 3D printed they just like fall down, of course, just like common sense things, and then they need to be built in a certain way, because usually an example like the arms get connected to the torso with some like specific joints, so you need to cut also the mesh at some point, to make sure that they can assemble them.
How long did this take? Because there's so many little strings on the bottom too.
A work like this, I think it took me about like 25 days, including also the revisions with the client. So like 25 days of like pure sculpting, In a place like Blur, you can't afford that. You can't afford like 25 days only for sculpting, because
20 days of gray shade and texturing.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it depends. From place to place, you have different schedules, different pipelines. But yeah, I mean, in this case, it's pure sculpting. So for me, it was very, very fulfilling, because I was really focusing a lot on the actual art and less on the technique, on the technical side of these things,
It's good. Here's some more work.
It's basically the same statues, and these are pretty big too. The scale is like 1/4, so maybe they're like 30. I don't want to say that in inches because it's not my unit of measure.
Well, they're your measure, so.
Oh, mine. Oh, great. So they're like about like 45 centimeters high.
45 centimeters.
Yeah, 45 centimeters.
Actual
From
centimeters.
35 to 60 centimeters high when they actually get printed. Yeah.
That's cool. We got some few questions from the fans, from
Okay.
Balchagi people. The most important part of design when you decide
Okay.
to design work.
Let's make this is a good question, in the sense that I want to make a clarification. So my job basically consists in making in 3D somebody else's vision. So usually somebody else's vision come in the form of a piece of concept art, So when the piece of concept art comes to me, I don't have like much saying, except of like maybe the concept is vague, so I'm allowed to fill some gaps, But most of the time, I'm considered, or people like me, they're considered like a very good executioners of somebody else vision in the form of like concept art. So it's not exactly my design. I'm not a concept designer. I'm mostly a production artist, But that said, that doesn't really mean that limits like your creativity. Well, in a way it does, because you don't really own the concept itself, but there is a whole world of like things and skills that you need in order to execute properly somebody else's vision.
It's like you have like a blueprint, and then you're creating a blueprint of paper into an actual 3D model.
Exactly, but it's not exactly like tracing. It's more like sometimes you have to give an interpretation, and the interpretation needs to be, it needs to be good. It needs to be like consistent with some sort of like vision, So when it comes to texturing, obviously sometimes you don't have any specific reference, because sometimes like the concepts are vague when it comes to that. When you build a shader, it's up to you to make like a proper metal, because nobody's gonna tell you from the concept how a specific metal needs to be. So that's things that belong to you. But as far as the design, you usually don't really have, at least in my position, much to say. I mean, I can't change, like, I don't know, a belt from a character if the design is very specific, or I can't really change the proportion, or I can't change the design of an armor. That's not what I do for living. I can do that in my spare time. I can do that for my project, but not in a place or in any other studio. I'm a 3D character artist, which is specialized in, you know, modeling, you know.
Yeah.
So
잠깐 이야기 드리자면 제가 이야기를 드릴게요. 그러니까 이게
You wanna come?
네. 이게 상당히 중요한 이야기를 제가 드리도록 할게요. 알렉산드로랑 저랑도 개인적으로 친분이 있어서 이 부분에 대해서 이야기를 저희가 되게 많이 했었는데 아티스트로 그 모델로서 가지고 있는 그 아티스틱한 부분이 상당히 중요한데 이게 이것보다 그러니까 어떤 회사에 우리는 예술가이긴 하지만 회사에서 일을 하는 사람들이잖아요. 그렇기 때문에 우리는
I don't know what to say.
뭐라고 해야 되지?
I agree.
그 아티스트하게 너무 강하면 회사계 차원에서는 상당히 안 좋을 수가 있어요. 그래서 내가 너무 아티스트 가면 왜냐면 그 컨셉 아티스트는 상당히 그 많은 컨펌을 가지고 컨셉이 나온 거잖아요. 근데 그 컨셉을 내가 뭐 아티스틱 하다고 해서 그 컨셉을 무시하고 내가 뭐 멋대로 하는 그런 사람들 멋대로 한다기보다는 나의 그걸 표현하려고 하는 사람 말이 잘 안 나오는데 그런 사람들이 되게 많았거든요. 근데 이제 알레산드로가 하는 말은 그거예요. 모델러면 모델러가 가지고 있는 그 가장 기본적으로 가진 그 역할은 그 컨셉을 제대로 2D를 3D로 그대로 이렇게 옮겨 나가는 게 사실은 가장 크고 가장 중요한 역할이거든요. 그 다음에 자기가 왜 아티스트한 부분이 마인드가 위로 올라가서 그 더해지는 거지. 네, 그래서 그 부분이 워낙 중요하다고 이야기를 하는 것 같아요. 네, 그 이야기를 제가 많이 했어요. 네, 그렇습니다. 그러니까 I'm a character model. I'm an artist. I can ignore it. I can do better than you. Something like I'm trying. Something like they destroy the whole original concept. But this is really bad.
No, yeah. What happens? Like, it's important to say that because a lot of people that maybe either they're student or they've never been in the reality of a production studio, they think that your work is like extremely creative or fun, or like you have a lot of sayings and meetings. And most of the time, it's not like that. It's structured like a hierarchy, and the vision that comes to you in the form of like a piece of concept art, it's been discussed a lot before. So when it reaches you, it's just the time of like doing execution, But somebody really liked that, So you can't really change it, and you have to have the humility to understand this concept of like, hey, you are in this position of the pipeline, and that's the only thing that we ask you to do it well, but don't change whatever we give you, because
at the end of the day, you're working for a company.
Right.
It's not your company. If you're working for a company,
exactly.
You got to understand that there are people up there who will give you what needs to be done.
And this is important to say, especially for people that approach this like field of computer graphics with the idea of like becoming professional. You have to understand that there are positions where you can definitely do concept, you can do like a lot of like intellectual work, but if you look at my portfolio, it's a lot of like executioning work based on somebody else's design, which doesn't mean that you're less of an artist or other people, but if you want to do your own stuff, most likely you have to do it in your spare time, or maybe cut a position in a company where you are so good at like concepting that they're going to give you a chance to work in a concept department. But when it comes to 3D stuff in a company like Blur, an example, the amount of input that you can give when it comes to the design is very, very limited. You can give inputs when it comes to like surfacing and texturing, but even there it needs to be discussed. It's not that you have like 100% like freedom, and you need to have a lot of like humility, a lot of like respect for the people like before and after your pipeline, because in the end it's always like a teamwork. It's not about yourself, not about you having to show your skills or to prove something. You need to do something that is going to work in a big environment, which is a 3D studio. So yeah.
그러니까 캐릭터 아티스트 모델링 같은 거 할 그 하고 싶으면 어떤 포트폴리오를 만드는 게 제일 좋을지 추천을 해줬으면 좋겠어요.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and frankly, I'm not sure there is like a recipe for that. You have to definitely have an understanding of what's out there in terms of like state of art of character modeling, and the only way to actually have this like 360-degree vision is to actually to go to forums, to go online, to have like connection on social media, and try to understand what are the best artists out there, because most likely the work that they do is what the company look for. So you need to have your own bar, your own standard when it comes to character modeling, and don't be afraid to have a standard which is like very close to the best artists in the market, because even if you are a student, don't set your bar low. It's like, yeah, you're probably sure you have like a bunch of people that you really like in the industry. Use them as model of reference. Don't be like, I will never be like them. So if your work is close to them or good as most of them, you are in the right way to have a consistent portfolio. And then we can talk about we can talk about presentation. We can talk about variety, which is important to have a certain variety in your portfolio. It really depends on where you want to apply. But generally speaking, if you have a portfolio which is like very, variegated in terms of like different kind of like styles, like, maybe photorealistic character, stylized ones, semi-realistic, and everything in between, creatures, humans, it's important because the company understands that you are like versatile when it comes to character modeling. Even there, I mean, some companies are very specific and they maybe want you to just like they hire you because you're very good with like photorealistic characters, and what matters? What matters is the quality, basically, the quality of your work. And again, you need to have a very high bar because these days the companies are very, very specialized and they only hire the best. Especially they invest in you if they think that you are really good, because investing these days sometimes means like to invest in a visa for you, So it's not that, they like your work and you immediately start working for them. Yes, you can do some freelancing, but even there, you have to understand in the global market, you basically compete with all the world, you know what I mean? Especially nowadays. So you can't be limited to like your reality of like your small community or, your circle of friends, your sample skills, or your work for your best friends and maybe they don't even do your job, but they're like, oh, you're great. Really, like, go directly in the big league, in the big forums, share your stuff a lot.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy. Don't be shy. You can't be shy, like, in the modern world of like social media. Yeah. Don't be afraid of getting critiques too,
It's actually a good thing because that's the only way for you to actually improve yourself.
Yeah, like, and also like be humble, but at the same time, don't be discouraged when like, because when you expose yourself to the internet, you will get all sorts of like feedback from professionals sometimes if they have the time to give you feedback from haters, from people that no matter what they're gonna say like bad things about your work, or they just like whatever. Just like be respectful with yourself, with your work, and just like be focused on what you wanna achieve. So in terms of like portfolio, I would definitely say presentation. So polish your work as much as possible before presenting it, because that's the only thing that matters, really. You can go to schools, which are important, but in the end, when you apply to a company, they will basically look to what you have to show in your portfolio. So it's important to graduate, of course. That is going to be useful also for visa and working permit reasons, but definitely you're going to be evaluated only for what you can show visually most of the time. Yeah, they're showing my portfolio. I don't know if this is like an example that works these days, because my portfolio has been accumulated in a span of like 10 years. But yeah, you should. Yeah, I really like to show characters in different views. I think is an important thing. I like to do texturing, so that's a value that you can show. You know, a lot of portfolio that I see online, example, they only have sculpting. It's understandable because like a lot of people these days they only focus on that through like ZBrush and don't really push texturing. That's legit. There are a lot of studios where actually you're going to be hired only for modeling. You know, especially in the big studios. It doesn't work in realities like Blur or in a game studio environment where you usually do both. You do both like modeling and texturing. So if you like it, yeah, try to push the texturing as well, and polish your work as much as possible. Don't leave like, you know, bad compressed images or, you know, unaligned, not aligned like sample skills and stuff like that. Try to be professional and inspired by the best artists out there, you know, and look for feedbacks, lots of feedbacks. Don't be shy when it comes to that.
And you know, as a person who's in production and who needs to find people when we need resource, what we do is we go online. We go on, you know, art community or Instagram or even
Forums,
forums.
Station.
Exactly, yeah, ArtStation. We go to those to see people's work. We don't ask for their reels. We go there to see what they like to publish, and that's how we get our people.
That's very true. I mean, my time at Blur, when I was lead character artist, sometimes we need a lot of like people to work with us because the workforce that sometimes we have in the studio is not enough. So we look for freelancers, and the producer were actually asking to you for recommendation, you know. And what I was doing, I was like, okay, I have like my list of people, and if they were not busy, we would start like contacting them. Sometimes they were, because they were like freelancers for living. So we were going online, and first thing I have in mind, example, is ArtStation. If I want to see a lot of people that actually do character modeling, you know. So if you have your portfolio there, and your portfolio is good, you might have the chance that actually people in the real big industry look at your work. And then if they're going to hire you, it depends on how good your portfolio is. But really, that's the only thing that you have to show, you know, on forums or CG communities. They don't really look at your title. They just look at what you can give, you know. And then where you come from, how old are you? That's kind of like comes like second. You know, they're gonna explore that later. but yeah. So that's what people should focus the most on, like your online presence, your variety, your level of like polishing in what you do, and of course like the consistency of your work with your actual standard of the industry. So yeah, I really recommend to be inspired by the best and not be like, oh, these are like too far away from me. I just like, you know, set my bar low, and then great stuff will come later when I work in studio. No, this is not gonna happen. Usually studios want you because you do badass work. So your level of improvement in a studio can happen. You know, you can definitely be a better artist when you start working in a good company, but usually the curve of like learning is not that like linear. It's like maybe like more like exponential. So you get better, but you are already good. Especially if you work in a big studio and they hire you. They expect you to be good. The amount of training, it can be there, you know, it depends on the position, you know, but don't set up for like junior artist position. I mean, it's good. It's a job and it's a great like entry door in the industry, but have a mindset a little bit more like, how do you say, ambitious, you know, why not? I mean, you have to love what you do because you're going to be surrounded by people that really like what they do. And it's going to show at some point. It's show in a lot of ways, in better artworks, more hours spent at your desk, more facility of like receiving notes, you know. So don't be too afraid of like technical things like topology or showing wireframes or showing the spec of your computer. Just focus on the art, because this is what people look at, you know. And then there is a way to make you, you know, understand all sorts of like other things that, you know, change from company to company. I'm talking about pipeline. So be interested more in the art than in like the technical knowledge, which is necessary to do the things that we do, but
that'll come later.
that will come later. That will come when you get a job, and every company is different, you know, so they have like different specification, different workflows, different pipelines. But at the core, they hire you because they're good at art. This is the only thing that matters. And you better be liking it. So, you know, if you...
Yeah, you have to like it.
You have to like it, yeah. I mean, I always like, an example, I always had the drive to do personal work beside my working experience at Blur, you know. And there was always like a fire that was like working in me, because like if you don't like it and you see it as a 9 to 5 job, it's never going to be 9 to 5 first. It's going to be like way more exhausting. So if you don't like it, you're going to reach a point where you're like, okay, another character, but I'm not really into it. At some point it's going to show. So especially at the beginning, you better love this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Then frustration and like, routine and jadedness can come later.
There's a lot of consequence that'll come, and if you don't love it as much, then you're not going to last. I think that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Or maybe you're going to change your job, and then you're going to try other things. So, you better be sure that you like to do characters, you know, because a lot of people do, and you're going to compete with these people around you. So.
자, 그러면 이제 여기 일일 도우미님이 많이 트랜슬레이션을 해주셔가지고 거의 그 핵심 요소를 찍어가지고 많이 해주셨어요. 우리 따로 하실
감사합니다.
왔던 질문이 지금 2명이 해주셨는데 어떤 질문이냐면 아트스테이션에서 누구를 팔로우를 했다면 이게 한마디로 okay, Alessandro, who's your favorite CG artist except me?
Oh, man.
And yourself.
Oh man, that's a big question. Here's the thing, like when I started, I really had like people that I admire a lot. When I started, there were people like Pascal Blanchet, there were like Steven Stalber, they were like, I mean they're still active, they're still in the industry, but those were my idols at that time. And then like when you start working in the industry, I don't know, you really know tons of people that they do their job very well, but then like genuine fascination for somebody else's work kind of like diminish, So I mean, these days I can like name like so many people that do my specific job when it comes like to character modeling, and I know that they do great job. They're like great artists. I can mention like, I don't know, like Bruno Camara. Yeah, he's amazing. I think he's been freelancing for Blur as well. Man, I don't want to left out anybody. No, I don't feel bad because like I mentioned only him, but there are so many people. I know, and I respect. Like an example, my friend and like James Koo used to be character modeling supervisor at Blur. He's amazing.
He's gonna be maybe next.
Arda Koyon, who is a son, he's another character modeler. He's amazing too. He's a great guy. All these people, they have an online presence, an online portfolio. So yeah, I mean, like check their work, and I use these people's work as an inspiration. I mean, if you're interested in working in a studio.
Thank you, Alessandro, for coming in today.
Thank you for having me.
It was great talk. Thank you, Jinho, for talking on the side. Yeah. And thanks everyone for just watching me listen and talking in English. And anyhow, thank you, the Onion Man, for translating.
Yeah, thank you, Onion Man.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.